Right now, there's a glimmer of hope for the lowest earners in the country who've been suffering most as the cost of living soars. The National Minimum Wage Commission on Monday gazetted new targets for the minimum wage. What it essentially points to is above inflation increases over the next few years. The latest increase announced in February saw the wage hiked by 10%. With that increase, the salaries of domestic workers were raised to around 4,000 Rand a month. The new targets could see this hiked even further. Let's get reaction now from Mashiane. She is from the Domestic Workers Association. Binky, thank you so much for your time here on eNCA. Of course, I would imagine that the association feels that this is good news. But because domestic work is a little bit of an informal sector in terms of the employment that happens there, how sure are we that this will actually be implemented by employers?
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us. Yes, that's a good question, because we know that we have beautiful laws in our country which don't work for many domestic workers. As we speak, the minimum wage of 25 Rand 42 cents an hour is not working for many domestic workers who are still underpaid and exploited. The only way for us to reach this is for us to work together with the employers' organizations and the Department of Labor to enforce compliance, to visit employers who are refusing to comply with the Act. Because not all employers cannot afford to pay the minimum wage. Others don't want to do it because they don't believe that domestic workers need a living wage or are supposed to be paid a living wage.
What kind of powers do these beautiful documents that you talk about, and I understand what you mean, and I do agree, we have beautiful laws in our country. What kind of powers do these laws give to domestic workers to be able to at least report these types of, inequalities in their sector or their employers?
Yes, domestic workers are advised, even in our meetings when we are with the Department of Labor, to approach the Department of Labor's offices. But domestic workers are often scared of approaching Labor Department, or also of approaching their employers, fearing to lose their jobs because it's happening. So the laws are good and powerful, but it's very difficult for domestic workers to benefit from these beautiful laws.
So then, where does this leave it then in terms of this law or this being gazetted on Monday? Where does it's good news, but at the same time, it doesn't look like it's something that can really be implemented.
What can happen is it's very unfortunate that many domestic workers, they don't want to be in unions. Others don't have knowledge about unions. For these laws to work for them, domestic workers need to unite. I always tell them that the women of 1956 will not wake up or come back to fight for them. They paved the way for them. Domestic workers have to take the swords and fight, go forward with the fight. So domestic workers need to stand up for themselves, because at the end of the day, they are by themselves. They need to come together and unite and fight against exploitation, against underpayment. As I said before, that not all employers cannot afford this, but because they know that domestic workers are silenced, domestic workers are fearful, they just do as they please. If domestic workers can know about their rights and stand up for their rights and take the employers on, take the employers to CCMA, take the employers to Labor Department, take the employers to Labor Court. We had a meeting with the lawyers today, which are going to work with us in such cases.
Well, Ms. Mashiane, the other part that is worrying in terms of the inequalities that happen there is that obviously a domestic worker that works for a company, an established company, for instance, at a bank, is much better than a domestic worker who works in someone's home. And I mean, you can imagine if somebody who is an employer from their house saying, look, I also didn't get an increase where I'm working because of the current economy that we're in. I won't be able to afford to pay you more. So it's either you accept what I'm giving you or you leave.
Yes, that's what's happening. And those employers, most of them are cruel. They do get increase every year, and they cannot prove to domestic workers that they didn't get increase. It's just that they know the situation of the domestic workers, the level of inequality, the poverty that most domestic workers are coming from, that they will just keep quiet and work for nothing. You know, some employers are even extreme that they treat their dogs so expensive, taking them to vet and buying them groceries while they didn't pay for domestic workers' salary. We see it is happening.
And those who will say, well, you live in my house, you eat my food, rent-free, you don't have to buy your own groceries. What do you say with regards to those ones? Because, a lot of people, especially in the difficult economy that we find ourselves in right now, will try and evade, paying more.
Yeah, yesterday there was a domestic worker who told me that she's getting 185 rand a day. The employer says you are eating here, you are staying here. I've called for that domestic workers to come to us so that we can assist, and we are going to assist her together with the Department of Labor, because this must not be left unchallenged, and we will not be silenced. We will fight for domestic workers' justice and rights until all is okay.
Do you have an example of success in what you're saying, success in fighting for your domestic worker? Is there a case that you've won before?
I have a success. The case of Maria Mashiane, the case of Koida. I fought for 8 years. I brought the case. I started the case of Maria Mashiane, and domestic workers today in South Africa are covered by Koida when they are injured on duty. That's the biggest victory that the domestic work sector has ever seen. I've got cases, sometimes must invite me with domestic workers who can speak for themselves that today my employer is giving me more than a minimum wage because the union has done this and that. Yes, I do have victories.
Well, that's very nice of you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I'll take you up on that. I'll ask the team to contact you so that you can just give us those interviews with domestic workers who can tell the positive stories. Mashiane from the Domestic Workers Association. Thank you for your time.